Good afternoon. I'm Brad Nicholson, and this is We've Got Issues. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you to Tri-City Community TV for allowing us or helping us get these little programs out. Before I introduce our guest, I'd like to acknowledge, and I'm going to read this because I want to get it right. I'd like to acknowledge that We've Got Issues is a nonpartisan, citizen-based forum where we discuss topics of interest to the Tri-Cities. Today's interview is taking place on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coquitlam First Nations. We thank the Coquitlam who continue to live on these lands and care for them, along with the waters and all that is above and below. Today, we're speaking with Diane Dilworth. She is a sitting member of the Port Moody Council. And Diane, thank you for being here today.
It's a treat to be here, and I must say that is a beautiful land acknowledgement that you just gave.
It's good, but I read it, and it scares the bejesus out of me to do because I don't want to get it wrong, and it's a difficult thing, but it's an important thing.
Very important.
I think that we address as we go forward in everywhere. Maybe if we get time, I'll ask some questions about that and what you're doing in Port Moody. But what we're here to talk about is there's a coming election that's coming up. And you are a sitting councillor. You've run before. You have experience that. You've run a couple of times, if I'm not mistaken, and you've been there for a while. What I'd like to ask first is get you to tell me a little bit about yourself and about that experience of being a councillor and so there's three things in this: about yourself, about being a councillor, and have you accomplished some of the things that you wanted to as a councillor?
Just before I get into talking about my professional and political life, I want to talk about my personal life a little bit. And you will see that personal life that I have, raising my children, living in my community, you will see that reference, and you'll see how that has led me to do a lot of things that I've done and made a lot of decisions.
Okay, let me just write this down. Diane, avoiding the question. Okay.
No, 19 years old, I was a single mother. I had a son. I met a fabulous man. We had a daughter, and I started working from home. And one of the jobs that I had was a recording secretary. So for a number of municipalities, including Port Moody, I went to every single council meeting and every committee meeting, and I took all the meeting minutes. And I started this job in 1995 in Port Moody. And every meeting I went to, I looked around the table and I went, you know what? There's a voice missing at this table. There's one young woman. There's nobody that has kids that are using the library and the recreation systems. Mm-hmm. This table is filled with people who are, for the most part, retired and have the luxury of time. Mm-hmm. And while they do provide a valid voice, I think there was some perspectives missing at the council table. Mm-hmm. So I ended up quitting that job as the council committee clerk. I ran for council, I got elected, and I go to all those same meetings, and I make a lot less money than I did back then.
Less money. It's a step down, right? So let me get this straight. On that council, that first council, there was a woman, or
there was. It was Councillor Megan Lottie. She's
right.
She's been serving for 3 years longer than I have.
And she's there right now, still. Isn't she?
She is still there. Yeah. I think there might be a healthy competition for who might be the longest sitting female councillor.
You're shooting for that, are you? Right.
I think we both are.
But what's important is female voices on councils, right? Because that's something that I think in the Tri-Cities has been an issue, is hearing women. Now, to be honest, I don't know Port Moody's history with regards to all the councils. I'm pretty new to the game of being interested in that sort of thing. But I do know in Port Coquitlam, I think that we went for a while with just a single person as well, a single female for a number of years. But it's always trouble. It's always difficulty.
Port Moody had its first female elected official back in the 70s. Okay. And I think we've been pretty consistent. And if you look at the makeup of council today in Port Moody, we have 4 women sitting at the table.
Of 6 people, right?
Out of 7, including the mayor.
Of course.
So you can see we've made some great strides since, in 1999 when I first ran.
Yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, Coquitlam as well has No, I know. I'm looking in
You're
my
trying to
head.
do the math.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think it's pretty close, but not quite there.
Yeah, yeah, and Port Moody right now, or Port Coquitlam has two. So hopefully, how do you feel about females running in?
Do you know what, going back to
This is your chance to say more women get out there and
more women get
run.
out there.
Please run.
Men and women, you know, if you read the studies, sometimes they communicate in different ways and they think in different ways and they share perspectives in different ways. And I think, particularly with the 4 women on Port Moody Council this time around, there's a lot of empathy and there's a lot of sympathy and there's a lot of those soft skills that women bring to the table.
Well,
but they have a very loud voice as well.
And that's good. Let's circle back to that a little later, because right now what I'd like to do is find out a little bit about. Again, I want to find out. Go back to that part where you wouldn't answer the question, which was I want to know if in your first terms or in the first few years that you've been on council, have you achieved the things that you wanted to achieve, and what are some of those things?
When I first got elected, I don't know that I had, this is on my bucket list that I want to check off. It's I want to serve, and that's something that's been ingrained in me since I was a child. And when I look at that first year I was on city council, I learned a lot, and I tended to sit back and sort of figure out how governance actually works, rather than jumping in and trying to, you know, fix everything that I saw was wrong. And one of the first very significant issues that I took on was that of cosmetic pesticides. There had been a municipality in the province of Quebec that had actually banned cosmetic pesticides.
When you say that, you mean like I want to say DDT, but like Roundup.
It's the cosmetic stuff that you use on your lawn to make it look pretty, that our utilities like CP Rail used to regularly spray up and down the lines. And Port Moody became the second municipality in all of Canada to ban cosmetic pesticides. So I'm very, very proud of that. I can remember a time when the city was addressing sustainability. I think Port Moody's quite a leader in terms of issues around sustainability and environment.
If I didn't know that Port Moody was a bit of a leader in this area, I would think you're pandering to my green side.
Not at all, Brad.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I think it was the early aughts. Councillor Mike Clay, Councillor Megan Lottie, and myself sat down with staff and wrote the first sustainability plan for the city of Port Moody. And that sustainability plan, you know, over decades, it might be 2 decades, has really provided the basis for a lot of what Port Moody has done. When you look at our sustainability checklist for developers who want to build in our community, when you look at the strong leadership role we're taking on climate action and what Port Moody is doing there. So we have been a leader, and I will continue to see us as being a leader.
Okay. So all right, strong on the environment. Or else, she says. No.
I chaired a task force on housing, and it was my very first housing task force in Port Moody, and it was looking at legalizing secondary suites. We haven't had legal suites for that long, and believe it or not, there's still municipalities throughout the province that don't have regulations around secondary suites. So together with a number of community leaders, we sat down, we did our homework, and we brought forward what was recommended regulations on how to ensure that people that were living in secondary suites were living in safe environments, and that the owners of the house were taking responsibility for their tenants.
Right. And so I guess that is when you speak towards housing in that context, we're talking about affordability for people.
Affordability and diversity of housing and affordability. The two can go hand in hand.
Right. So those are issues. Those are a couple of the issues that you worked in the past, and you're proud of them, and so you should be. Going forward into this next election, can you tell me about what some of your goals are, and why, and what are things? Why should people be excited about seeing you there again?
I must be doing something right because I've been there since 1999.
How many elections is that? Give me.
Running again this time, it'll be my seventh term. I did take 3 years off when my daughter was 13 and my son was 16, and they needed me more than the city did. So I did take a personal hiatus.
Okay, good. So all right, so you must be doing something right. So what do you think what we should look forward to in Port Moody in the next administration?
Well, let's look at some things that we've been doing this term, working
Okay.
together with some fellow colleagues. We worked on an affordable housing task force,
Okay.
and it was myself and councillors Roy A. Lubick and Lottie, and we literally spent 6 months, and we looked at what were other municipalities doing that were really helping advance new homes and affordable homes in their communities. And we really looked to New Westminster, who's got some very progressive policies. And as a result of us getting together, making recommendations that were endorsed unanimously all by Port Moody City Council, we have a family-friendly housing policy which mandates that builders have to build so many 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, in some case 4-bedroom units in their multifamily complexes. We have an inclusionary zoning policy right now where anyone that wants to come and build in Port Moody, depending on the size of their project, they will have to include up to 15% of non-market housing for residents. I'm trying to think. We have a tenant relocation policy. I think we were one of the first.
Let me ask you a question quickly, just so people watching, and because I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer at times. When you say non-market housing, what do you mean?
So there's a spectrum of housing, and I did spend many years working with the BC Nonprofit Housing Association and the Co-op Housing Federation of BC. So my remarks are coming from that experience working in the field.
Sure.
So non-market housing is housing that is somehow subsidized. So right at the very end of here, at the lowest end of the spectrum, you have those that perhaps are experiencing homelessness and are living in shelters.
Right.
Your next level on the spectrum is supported living, and this might be people coming out of penitentiaries, it might be people dealing with mental health issues, it might be women fleeing violent homes, and they're in a supportive environment. Then the spectrum moves to where you look at market rental, where people are paying market rents for rental.
Now that's on the market spectrum.
That's correct.
Okay.
And then you go into a home ownership of perhaps apartments, townhouses, until you get to the full spectrum as full ownership, regardless of what type of housing that is.
Yeah. So non-market housing might be for people who are who need assistance. All right. So I didn't mean to interrupt, but I think that it's important.
And it's not just those that need some assistance. It comes down to affordability. And I think you've seen, certainly from the provincial government, you've seen a lot of push on getting some of this missing middle housing. And it's homes where families that are earning between perhaps $30,000 and $80,000 a year can find a place that they can afford to live.
Right. And so now I'm going to circle back to the percentage. You're making sure that developers who are building in your community are providing that kind of housing as well.
The goal is 15%,
15%.
Depending on negotiations for additional density or community space or childcare space. That may be fleeting, but that is the expectation when a builder walks in the door.
Yeah. So, and this might be tough because we didn't talk about this beforehand, but the percentage of growth in the Tri-Cities is in the coming years is projected quite high. Will that 15% keep up with what's needed with the growth of Port Moody?
Well, I certainly hope so.
Well, but hope isn't going to help.
I can tell you the provincial government mandated that every municipality prepare a housing needs assessment report.
Right.
And so the city hired a consultant who came in and did a very in-depth, comprehensive look at what we have existing today, looked at population projections, where is it projected that those people are going to come from, what are those housing needs going to be, how many people are on the wait list at BC Housing for subsidized housing, and came up with this quite fulsome housing needs assessment report. And on our council agenda tonight, we're actually looking at a housing action plan that has been derived from that needs assessment report. Municipalities are now mandated to create a housing needs assessment report every time they update their OCP, the official community plan, which traditionally is anywhere from 5 to 8 years. So municipalities have to take that open-eyed look every 5 to 7 years and say, what is it that we need to build in our community, and are we building it?
Yeah. How's it going?
Things have been a little bit slow in Port Moody, but I see where you can see a lot of construction on the ground right now.
Right.
Port Moody slowed down a number of years ago, and it's just been recently that we've got a number of projects on the go. We've got some smaller ones that you see coming to fruition, certainly the purpose-built rentals on Dudney. We've got some purpose-built rentals on St. John, but you've also seen a number of market condos, certainly along Murray Street, down toward Rocky Point Park. We're still trying to make sense and grasp with some of the larger developments, such as Coronation Park, which is back on Council's agenda this evening. We have to look at what is planned for our transit-oriented development. When you look at the giant parking lot in Moody Centre, where we have the West Coast Express and we have SkyTrain, there's some differing opinions on what should be put there. And I don't know if you're aware, but last week, 3 provincial ministers jointly wrote a letter to the mayor's office in Port Moody and shared it with council, asking us to focus higher levels of density within our TOD areas, particularly the TOD where the West Coast Express and the SkyTrain is.
And so with that kind of density, which I understand all communities are struggling with at this point. You just sparked a question for me. It's like, what's going to be done about transit in that kind of case? Because just from experience, I've lived in the Tri-Cities for 30 years, a little more maybe, and I've watched the traffic get more and more difficult as I think, if I'm not mistaken, we've seen a 40% growth of people in the last 20, 30 years.
And it all goes hand in hand, people and housing and traffic. And I understand a lot of frustration because I see that in Port Moody. We literally have 2 roads, 2 main roads that go through Port Moody, one being St. John Street, and then you have Clark, which connects to Murray. And that's the commuter traffic ways, and they do get congested. In an ideal world, we would have everybody riding their cycles or ride sharing or taking transit that's right outside their doors. But unfortunately, that's not a reality yet. Traffic is also compounded by the traffic in Port Moody is just not the people that live in Port Moody. We have quite a healthy commute coming from Coquitlam, certainly on the new community up in Burke Mountain. But we are always looking at ways to activate roadways to enhance a pedestrian or a cyclist experience, and hopefully that will help. I'm hoping that if we can provide more opportunities for electric vehicles, perhaps that would be a solution in that people could only use electric vehicles on HOV lanes, for example, and that sort of incentivized electric vehicles, and it's kept all the traffic on the HOV lane, which is often underutilized while people maximize the regular lane.
Is that there are electric vehicles? You're on council, so you have a bit of an opportunity to shape that argument and direct the conversation. Is that a priority for you, or is that a priority for your council?
Do you know, I think addressing climate action is certainly one of the very most top priorities for the City of Port Moody, to the extent that we have a climate action plan that has a bill that's in the millions and millions of dollars.
Sorry, somewhere I don't know what you just said. Somehow I don't know what you.
So I'm not on the climate action committee. I haven't been a part of it, but the city has adopted a climate action plan with a multi-year phased approach to activities and initiatives that the city can take on to address reducing GHG emissions and addressing the climate crisis that we've identified.
Right. So and are you on track, or are you?
I believe we are on track. Right. Certainly the initiatives that we have been addressing in the first number of years have been funded. They've been funded through grants from other levels of government, and they've been funded by the city. So
you are on track, and that relates to electric cars?
As being just one small component of it. Yeah.
You don't have to worry about that.
It's one very small component in that the city's provided chargers throughout our municipality. When a developer or builder's coming forward, we are certainly demanding that EV charging stations, or at least the basic infrastructure for them, are provided.
Are you like, that's a strong word, you're demanding it, or is that like there's just an
It's within,
agreement
it's,
that you're,
do you know what, it's
do you have to demand it, or are
me-
developers
me-
like reluctant to put those in?
sometimes there is a cost to it. It's something that can be negotiated.
It has to be negotiated. Sorry, like how come it has to be negotiated? Just put the damn things
Things
in.
in.
Like,
And do you know,
like, do you have to negotiate windows? Do you have to negotiate doors and frames? No, just put them in so we'll have them. Sorry.
no, do you know what?
Yeah.
But that when you talk about demanding for buildings that are backing up along the SkyTrain, there is a specific standard of soundproofing and windows and everything that you must use.
So you negotiate those things,
Yeah.
is what you're saying. Yeah. So okay, but you don't negotiate windows, but you're going to put them in.
Yes,
Anyway,
yeah,
anyway,
I see where you're going.
I'm getting on a track.
You know
right?
what? Developers, builders quite often need to be nudged.
It's about money, right? It's
Yes.
about like, can we get away with this? And I guess then it becomes your job as a council. So sorry, I'm kind of going off the track here. I'm
it's
having
okay.
more of like a conversation. It becomes your job as a council to sort of set it. Well, you're setting a standard for your community as to what level of expectation you should have for them if they want to build in your community. And that's good. And sorry, I'm going off in my track. I'm trying to take you down this environmental path because I like to.
You can have me back in another show and we'll talk just all about that.
There are other things I want to talk to you about. So what have we talked about so far? We've talked about, so that environmental thing, we've talked about housing and development.
Can we talk about something fun?
Yes, that's what I want to do. This is all about you.
In 2013,
Okay.
I helped
In the
bring
past.
back
Oh, something you did in the
a
past.
civic.
Okay.
We brought back a civic parade for
Yeah.
decades. Port Moody had an
civic parade.
annual parade.
Yeah.
And somewhere it just disappeared. And
Yeah.
it had been decades. And 2013 was the city's 100th anniversary, our big centennial. And we brought back a community parade.
Okay.
And there was thousands of people lining the streets. And we held this parade in 2013, and we held it again in 2014. And unfortunately, in subsequent years, I just could not convince a majority of council to allocate the funding to bring back the parade.
Yeah.
But you know what? It's something I'm not going to let go of, because we're one of the only municipalities that doesn't have. We have Car-Free Day, but that's different.
You also have like that, you have Golden Spike Days.
And Canada Day, and this past weekend we just had Rib Fest.
Okay.
So there is a lot of events, and when
Ribfest is more of a commercial endeavor, is it not?
no, it's not.
community thing?
It is very much a community thing. It's organized by Coquitlam Rotary. Or sorry, Port Moody Rotary is not going to like that faux pas. The Port Moody Rotary.
That's my job, to pull out those little things.
And then they rely heavily on volunteers. I literally spent 2 shifts slinging beer and serving food this past weekend, and all of their money earned, their net profits, goes back into charitable endeavors. So no one's walking away with a bunch of money in their hand, except for the ribbers, who obviously do make money off their product.
Yeah, that kind of thing happens. So,
So we have a citizen satisfaction survey on the agenda later this evening, and one of the things that we hear from our community is they want more events. They want more family events, they want more free events, and I think something like a parade certainly would help satisfy that desire.
Okay.
And moving forward, I'm certainly going to be focused on looking at how we can better support our families and our young people with free entertainment
celebrating the
opportunities.
community.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so I want to. I think we're down. We only have a few minutes left, and there's a question that I want to get into because my creative partner in this endeavor, Nancy and Furness, and I have always spoken to everybody that comes by. We've talked about, and it's been a goal of ours to advocate for. In all of the communities, Tri-Cities communities, an environment where both sides of any kind of issues are heard and respected. And I want to talk to you because I know that in Port Moody there have been contentious times on council. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about, I don't want to talk about it. I want you to talk about it. I just want to hear your perspective as to how you think that we could have councils in the Tri-Cities that are more that speak better to each other. I've slaughtered how that should sound.
I
You know where I'm
get where
going.
you're coming from, because the very first time we had a discussion, I think I referred you to James Hogan's book about toxicity in the workplace,
Maybe.
and it was called "I'm Right and You're an Idiot."
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought you were talking to me when you said that. Okay. Because my wife says that.
And this has been, out of the 6 councils I've been on, this one has certainly been the most challenging. And you're right, there seems to be this us and them, or them and us, sort of divisiveness. And Port Moody's been a particularly bad example of this, because there is such division on our council. And every time we get together and talk about how is it that we can get over this, we tend to go back to the same places where we are. And I think we need to get really uncomfortable with each other before we can get to that place where we can have that very honest, transparent, respectful conversations. I know it's quite sad to say there's some Tuesdays where I feel like I'm going into a battlefield, and I need to be prepared to battle for my position. And that shouldn't be the case. When I think back on councils before, we would have some very deliberate debates without hurting people's feelings. And I think if we get back to the fact that we're all people, we're not just an opinion at the table that is there to be attacked, personally or politically.
So how do you do that?
You get to a place where you're open and honest and vulnerable to each other, and you make that commitment to be better, to do better. And you need that to happen unanimously. And when you have people at the table that aren't prepared to do that, unfortunately, you're not going to get to that place. I think it also comes under the pretext of having strong leadership that will model that. If there's 7 people on a council, it's not just one person that needs to step and say, this is what we have to do. You have to have leadership right at the top that models the behavior that is expected of all members of council. And unfortunately, that doesn't happen in Port Moody. I think you may be aware that I personally brought a recommendation to the Lower Mainland Local Government Association looking to enshrine a provincial code of conduct. Because right now, every municipality sort of has its own code of conduct. Port Moody was one of the first in the Lower Mainland to create one. But the code of conduct process of complaints and resolution, that responsibility is left to the 7 members of council. And so it very much is a partisan process. And not a, what's the word I'm looking for, non-biased approach to dealing with what member of council might feel is a complaint or a slight or a breach of the code of conduct.
Okay. I'm almost out of time for today. I'm almost sure that I am just about out of time. But maybe I can squeeze in this one question that's on this path. Do you think there'd be any room for like an ombudsman of some sort, or some kind of a council?
Absolutely, and I know
you'd feel comfortable with that.
Absolutely, and that's certainly something that's been debated quite ferociously and agreed to at that Lower Mainland Local Government Association, which is the regional body of elected officials here. We also have our provincial Union of BC Municipalities, and they've had that debate, and it certainly has been, the City of New Westminster have been very, very strong advocates for this ombudsman, and I believe that we're going to make some progress there, because unfortunately, you've seen a lot of politicians gone wild or gone bad, or however you want to say it. And right now, there's not a provincial entity or a piece of provincial legislature that can deal with those issues, such as, you know, we had a mayor that was charged with a sexual assault, and there was absolutely no rules for us to follow. So there have been a number of politicians throughout the province, you know, desperately asking the province, can you please put in a mechanism so that every municipality has tools to deal with instances such as this?
Right. So we've covered a ton of stuff in this particular conversation, and I appreciate it. And I think that there's stuff for us to talk about in the future. You've given us a chance to know a little bit about your past, about who you are as a person. You've given us information about things that are important to you, where you want to see the government go. We've had a good conversation about some of the other things that are going on in our community, and I appreciate it very much.
Can we end where we started with reconciliation?
With reconciliation, sure.
We started with that beautiful land acknowledgement, and I want to acknowledge the tremendous work that is taking place in Port Moody in terms of reconciliation. It was some time ago when I chaired the Heritage Commission. We looked at our Heritage Award, and it was completely based on a scenario of colonialism. And so we reworked that. Most recently, on the day of the Indigenous people, June 21st, rather than have a council meeting, Port Moody City Council had their own land acknowledgement released. And all of council and senior staff went through a blanket exercise. Our staff went through a blanket exercise earlier in the day. We actually had a public blanket exercise where we invited members of the public to come in. And I think if you've gone through one of those, you know it's an incredible, powerful experience. And City Council right now has a significant priority of looking at how we can best advance reconciliation through council, through staff, through our community, in our events, in everything we do.
Sure. That's good. Thank you for that.
Thank you,
very
Brad.
much. Thank you, Diana Dilworth, for being here today.
Always a
giving
pleasure.
us an insight into you and your career and the work that you do on Port Moody City Council. Thank you again to Tri-City Community TV for hosting these events and helping us that we've got issues. Speak to the people in our community who are in charge of our community, so to speak.
Great.
So again, thank you.
Thank
you
you
very much for watching.